Donald Trump has retaken the Oval Office for barely even 2 months now, and in spite of that, he has been able to prove himself as equally of a geopolitical disaster as Joe Biden has during his entire presidency. This really is saying something considering how bad the United States' geopolitical endeavors have been in the past 30 years. Even with the bar set so low, the past 4 years have been abysmal for the country, and Donald Trump seems to be saying, "Hold my beer," as he is speedrunning the decline of the United States' soft power. In regards to Joe Biden's foreign policy, it could be described as a failure in all aspects. Starting with Afghanistan, a deal was brokered between the Taliban and the US by Trump as he was leaving office. In exchange for a lack of aggression, the United States promised to slowly begin removing troops from the region. With Biden in office, the Taliban broke the agreement by sending in personnel into Afghanistan as US troops were leaving. Instead of attempting to restore any semblance of order, or provide any kind of consequences for not upholding the deal, Biden opted to accelerate the removal of the US troops in the region, in time for the 20th anniversary of the war. No doubt this is because, on paper at least, it would have yielded a tremendous value in re-election advertising. Unfortunately, this accelerated removal of the troops meant that the Afghanistan military was completely caught off guard, and with severely degraded morale. Within a couple of months, 20 years, thousands of dead soldiers, $2 trillion, and millions of equipment left behind were suddenly completely pointless. It would be no coincidence that this would set the pace for the remainder of Biden's presidency. A few months later in February, Russia invaded Ukraine, opening the war by launching missiles into the country and targeting civilians. In case there is any doubt. A year later, a Chinese spy balloon sent the country into a mass panic in January of 2023. Towards the end of the year, in October, we had Hamas triggering a war with Israel. By January of 2024, the United States was in the Red Sea, intercepting missiles and bombing launchers in Yemen. However, this completely failed to accomplish anything productive, and even led to fratricide with his Super Hornet. To put it lightly, Biden's foreign policy was absolutely terrible, marked by repeated concessions to adversaries to get them to the negotiating table, and this meant there was no real consequences for negative or disruptive behavior. You can do whatever you want, as long as you show up to make promises you don't intend to keep. It was a cascading destruction of the United States' deterrence, leading to adversaries becoming emboldened. With Trump in office, foreign policy has again shifted, and it's proven to be just as disastrous. Immediately alienating Denmark and Canada, he claims to want to annex Greenland and the Canadian mainland. The threat of terrorists has just about everyone, domestic or abroad, concerned. Above all, however, has been his handling of Ukraine. Starting out hot by blaming Ukraine.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
For a conflict Russia started. Again, in case there was any doubt. Routinely, Trump also claims the United States has supported Ukraine more than Europe.
And really, we can help Europe because Europe really helped. President Trump said that they made less support, but they are our friends and they are our very supportive partners. They really gave a lot, Mr. President. They did.
They gave a lot, but they gave much less.
No.
Much less.
No. No.
Don't argue with me.
No. Okay.
Which is false. And the amount he cites isn't even remotely close, even by generous accounts. Out of the $350 billion Trump claims, it's closer to $183 billion, which generously includes provisions to increase activity in Europe, which the United States would have done regardless. This means that real support has been closer to $114 billion. Of that, only about 75 to 80 billion has been tangible military or humanitarian assistance. So the gross overstating of support on part of the United States makes it look greedy already. But then the minerals deal is stated to be for $500 billion, which exceeds the incorrectly stated support by another $150 billion. So the amount is for way, way more than the United States has ever even pledged to support Ukraine for. So it is not about paying back that support. Even then, the return bargain is nothing. So with no security guarantees, the ceasefire means nothing. The only guarantee offer was Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and no one tries anything when Donald Trump is in office?
25 times he broke a ceasefire.
But he never broke to me. He never broke to me.
No, you were the president. You were the president during.
He never broke to me.
In 2016, you've been the president, Mr. President. You've been.
You know, except when Wagner attacked U.S. forces in Syria. So anyways, the signing for this agreement then completely falls apart when J.D. Vance talks about Zelensky being ungrateful, which, that doesn't even remotely check out either.
This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
An honor to have you, and please, I'd like to say something.
No, thank you so much, Mr. President.
Following the botched signing, Trump then paused all aid and intelligence delivery to Ukraine for about a week, which you better believe Putin took full advantage of, as reported by the Institute of Understanding War. And speaking of Putin, his reaction to all of this has been to outright deny any ceasefire, as it is still working towards its goals of its special military operation. Only with the accomplishment of said goals would Russia then consider a ceasefire. So give us everything we want or no deal.
Заявлением Дмитрия Сергеевича Пескова у вас разговор должен до 18 часов состояться с Дональдом Трампом. Не знаю, насколько он... Работа такая. Ну, не знаю, сейчас надо посмотреть, что на эту фразу скажет Трамп. Может быть, он любит интервью давать, может уже
Трампа не упоминал, я
Не-не-не, он узнает, что у нас дискуссии.
So what's the fallout of this? Well, it's been considerable. Almost immediately, the European Union has changed some of its financial structures to allow for states to increase funding towards defense, without triggering fiscal safety nets. For that reason, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has unveiled an $840 billion defense budget. And considering how Trump has been critical of Europe for not taking its defense seriously enough, which, for once he was right about, this does sound like a political win. Unfortunately, very little of the $840 billion is going towards the US, which historically has been the primary source of defense procurement for Europe. To be fair, this has been a trend establishing itself before Trump, but recent events has basically sent this trend into full afterburner. Before we had Iraq and Pakistan looking to the JF-17 to replace their F-16s, which they can't get parts for. Poland has been investing heavily into German and South Korean armaments for the military refresh. Sure, they're still buying things like M1 Abrams tanks, but it's on a far smaller scope compared to the rest of the military. Even Japan has grown disinterested in working with the US, as it was snubbed of an F-15 replacement by not being allowed to purchase the F-22, and had a bad experience getting the F-2 into operation when working with Lockheed Martin. While Japan is working with the US to create a loyal wingman, the main and arguably most important component, the manned fighter, has been merged with Britain and Italy's Tempest project. Now, this trend is accelerating dramatically, as Portugal has cancelled its F-35 order completely. Germany is thought to be reviewing their stance on the F-35, along with Canada. Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has stated that he seeks independence from the United States as far as defense is concerned. Part of the public fear is a kill switch, which I consider unlikely, simply because large portions of the jet are produced in the US, which can just stop shipping them. Along with not providing software updates or denying GPS services, there's a whole host of ways to sabotage potentially hostile F-35s without having an abusable kill switch. At the same time, that's a totally valid list of reasons to reconsider buying equipment that I just spouted off. That being said, let's focus on the F-35 as an example. The Joint Strike Fighter program had significant funding from European countries to enable its development. Much like the F-16 before it, the massive scale of the sales and the production of the aircraft made it massively competitive due to economy of scale and cost splitting. If partner nations no longer trust the United States to procure their weapons, this means the United States will be paying for much more expensive assets. A couple examples would be the F-22 costing about $350 million apiece, and the B-21 being about double that. These provide excellent analogs as they're not being funded or purchased by foreign nations, unlike the F-35, which is currently running for an estimated $90 million apiece. And it's not just the F-35 that benefits from this. Currently the US is upgrading Block 40 and 50 F-16s to the Block 70 standard, which, like the F-15EX that the US is buying, had its development paid for by other countries. Without partner nations investing into the United States military-industrial complex, this means the entire burden falls onto the United States government, which already pays way too much for what it gets. But I don't want to get too deep into that, as this will be the subject for the next analysis video. So the too long didn't read is whether or not you agree with globalization and the United States' role in maintaining it. Causing a rift between the nation and its allies isn't the solution. A more reasonable approach would be to have slowly backed off to allow for other countries to fill the void with grace. After all, it's stability that allows for commerce to flourish anyways. Unfortunately, instead of bowing out with grace, the United States has essentially earned a massive amount of distrust from partner nations. Partner nations that the United States is growing increasingly reliant on to protect its interest abroad. This isn't a new trend, but it's been massively accelerated by the most two recent administrations. Despite being from opposing parties, the policy is the same: divest from obligations and then spend it as a move towards peace. Despite solving none of the core issues, thus ruining the future outlook of the nation and its endeavors abroad. Thank you for watching. The goal of this channel is to cut through sensationalist, biased reporting to inspire intellectual honesty and curiosity. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your dance with the angels.